So we were going to get into the story about the flag, the pledge, I guess, more specifically. What have you brought to the table tonight, Derek J?
Well, did you say the Pledge of Allegiance, Ian?
When I was younger?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there were times in my life when I did, but I remember as early as elementary school not liking it, and I would purposefully change the words around.
Whoa.
So I would change the words to like pledging allegiance to the USSR or things like that, like stuff that I didn't really know what it meant, but I didn't like to say what they wanted me to say.
Just throwing a wrench.
And so I would change the words.
Ladies and gentlemen, he was born this way.
It seems like it. I all of the evidence I have is that I was always sort of an anti-authoritarian.
What about you, Mark? Did you say it?
Oh, yes,
Hand
absolutely.
over the heart?
And relished it. I mean,
Really?
I'm that personality type.
You were like, I did it the best every day. I stood up and looked up.
Or it made your heart swoon, that kind of thing? Like, patriotism.
I'm the kind of person that they're aiming for. Like they want
a sucker.
They want them. Well, you can call them what you want.
A dupe.
In the military, they call them bullet catchers, right? Like you want that person that is going to be there to catch the bullets when they need to be caught. Somebody who's die for a greater cause.
You're saying that the apple pie, the flag, all that stuff, like the Star Spangled Banner, that stuff all worked on you, right?
Yes.
Just as it's supposed to, as it's intended to. I mean, the Pledge of Allegiance is really an indoctrination chant.
Well,
ultimately,
that's a socialist indoctrination chant.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. I had problems with saying the Pledge of Allegiance too back when I was in school, and I remember
back to elementary school.
I finally stopped saying it. Yeah, like all throughout, I remember being like, "This is weird. I don't like this." But so much of school is "This is weird. I don't like this. I'll just go along to get along." That I just thought nothing of it. That it's just like every other part of school that I hate. But
at some point, I just stopped participating in it, at not participating, and I got in trouble for that.
Well, I didn't have the courage to be the first in line to do that. But in 11th grade, I remember distinctly seeing someone else not standing up for the pledge.
How did that feel?
It was cool. I was like, they're not standing. I probably don't have to stand. Look, the teacher's not doing anything about it. I could probably do this tomorrow. And I tried it tomorrow. The next day, I didn't stand, and some snitch pointed out, they're not standing for the pledge, to me and the other student who was a girl. And the teacher said, that's fine. He didn't care. He was one of those, like, I don't care what happens in my classroom. Light things on fire. I'm not going to do anything. But that was so freeing. And I never said it again. After that, I was like, this has been weird. I can't believe I said it the whole time.
I think that we can talk more about the pledge, but just as a tangent from that, I think that the example you're giving of being ennobled by the courage of the first person, the person who took that first step, stepping off the cliff into the unknown, it's not so bad after all. You've decided to jump on board the bandwagon. It was a small bandwagon at that point, but you were a joiner at that point.
Yes.
And now you have become a leader, and you have, I think, set that same example for other people through your activism, through civil disobedience, for instance. And it can be as simple as what you're talking about, whether it's somebody who's not standing for the pledge or not standing for a man in a robe, a judge, when they come into the room. I mean, we've seen this happen before where we'll be in court, and if there's activists in there, at least in Keene, they generally will not stand for the judge when he or she comes in the room. And sometimes you'll hear audible gasps from other members of the audience.
At this point, it's just ordinary.
No, they don't even say "all rise" anymore in the
sometimes
Keene
they don't.
Today they didn't say it when Judge Burke came and left. They didn't even say "all rise." People just stand and sit as they please.
Yeah, and so that can be something that is encouraging as well. And I've seen that happen. I've seen it where if you have enough activists in the courtroom. Now, today we didn't. There were a lot of just regular folk there who were there for arraignments, and then there was maybe half a dozen or so activists. And the number, of course, grows as time goes on as people get up out of bed and manage to make their way down to court.
Stagger in.
But I've seen it happen where we've had a majority of the audience in the courtroom.
Yes.
And numbers change everything. So if it's just me sitting down in a courtroom full of people, that's not going to encourage anyone else to stay seated for the most part. But if you're in a courtroom with 20 people in it and 10 of those people are activists who are not going to stand for the judge, when the time comes for people to all rise and half of the audience stays seated, that's the time when you'll see other people not really rise up as much or just stay seated entirely because they're going along with what they perceive to be the majority at that point.
Yeah.
It's ennobling.
And isn't that interesting? So humans are like social creatures, and even when sitting across a table from one another, they might mirror each other, folding arms or whatever the sort of body language is. People sort of trend along that. Like you mentioned, people sitting. If they see most people sitting, that's what they want to do. So it takes a lot of courage to be the first person to do something different. And especially something like saying the pledge, which is supposed to be noble, and you're supposed to do it in the morning.
You're a bad person.
Yeah.
There are people listening to this right now. Mouths agape.
In fact, hold that thought. Let's go to Patrick in New Orleans listening to WGSO. Hello, Patrick.
Hello. I want to talk about the pledge.
Please.
All right.
I'm 70 years old. I'm a disabled Vietnam vet. When I was a child, my elders had been through the Second World War. And I heard over and over again that freedom isn't free. It costs blood. Over my 70 years, I've found that that's correct. It costs blood if you want to be free. The sweat off your brow. It isn't cheap. Freedom is not cheap, sir. Under God, that's another thing. I've got some folding money in front of me, and it says, "In God we trust." I've got a little bit of knowledge about the history of my country. Most of the founding fathers. Now, I'm not saying 80% or 70%. I don't know what it is, but most of them were preachers. They were ministers. We are founded upon a country that believed in God.
I thought they were lawyers.
We were founded upon a country, a nation that believed in earning their way.
Patrick, I'm a little confused. What does what you're saying have to do with the Pledge of Allegiance exactly? You were making comments about blood earlier, for freedom, that kind of thing. What's that have to do with the Pledge of Allegiance in your mind?
You pledge to the flag, which is the country.
No.
The flag is
It's a piece of cloth.
And you're pledging allegiance. Do you know what allegiance means? I'll define it for you if you don't.
Yeah, please tell me. What does that mean to you?
A league is a king, right?
A liege?
No, sir.
No?
No, sir. Allegiance is the promise to uphold an idea. The king is an idea. Freedom is an idea. Country is an idea.
And it's a terrible countries are a terrible idea because they divide human beings from one another. They create artificial divisions between people, and that leads to things like war and destruction and the aggrandizement of politicians and things like that.
You're wrong. My country is it's a piece of land that we hold, and our piece of land is different than the piece of land in Iraq. Those people don't hold it. They fight over it.
I don't know if I agree with you, Patrick. I thank you for the call tonight. I see plenty of people fighting over this particular piece of land. What do you think politics is? It's fighting over control over this piece of land. We just had a guy who was on the line, and he seemed kind of he seemed upset. He was kind of coming from that position that, Mark, maybe you can relate to, because you were sort of describing that at one time in your past you were the guy who the Pledge of Allegiance worked on. That it made you feel good to say the pledge. It made you feel like you were special. The caller earlier was alluding to this idea that, well, our plot of land's different and we're better. He didn't say that, but that is essentially what I think he was insinuating with his statement that, well, those people in the Middle East, they're always fighting over their plot of land, and over here we don't do that. But that's not true.
For history buffs, I think that the important thing to look at the pledge is let's understand where it came from. It was created by a man named Francis Bellamy in the late 1900s.
No, 1800s.
1800s, excuse me, 19th century. Late 19th century, late 1800s.
Right.
He was a national socialist, like Hitler. The party through
Didn't he
which
call himself a Christian socialist?
All right, he can. I'm sure they use those terms interchangeably,
Okay.
but I've certainly heard him referred to as a National Socialist too. He developed the pledge. He and his brother developed the pledge. I believe that one of them was a flag salesman, and they had a salute to the flag that's very similar to the Nazi salute. The hands in slightly different position, but you have this kind of. It's amazing.
It's
to
creepy.
See, yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see a schoolroom full of black kids Nazi saluting the U.S. flag, and there are photos of this out there.
Just Google Bellamy salute. That's all you need to look for.
That's all you need to do, because this is what Francis Bellamy. It's his salute to the flag,
Which he borrowed from the fascists,
yeah,
Roman fascists.
And there's nearly
And then Hitler then borrowed it from us.
from the United States. The United States is the birthplace of modern fascism. There's no doubt about it. And there's, this is the history of the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, you can say what you want as far as patriotism goes, but you cannot deny the history of the pledge. And if history is important to you, then the origins of the pledge should be important to you. Consider that under God was added because of the Red Scare, what is considered largely to be a terrible time in U.S. history, when the government goes around searching for people who might be communist sympathizers, looking under, basically a modern witch hunt. I mean, all you need to do is spend a little bit of time researching this, and you'll realize this was a terrible time in U.S. history. I'm no communist. Got nothing nice to say about communists.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't change the fact that you don't want witch hunts going on, no matter whom they're looking for. So the pledge is surrounded in bad history, and it should be honestly put away by patriots. If you care about what the founding fathers might have said, as the gentleman who was a Vietnam War vet sort of alluded to, you'll consider that loyalty oaths to the king were considered reprehensible.
This isn't to the king. This is to the country.
Well, it's an allegiance, and the term liege, unlike what he was alluding to, another term is lord liege.
Well, you had said it meant king, but and then he said it didn't mean king. It doesn't actually. It means lord.
It's the same thing.
Didn't they have different lords back then? Like lords
Yes.
of certain land, things
You're
like
right.
that?
Okay, so one can liege their way on up the liege ladder, all right? But it's no doubt it means lord. It means that I shall doff my hat and bow before you so that you might lop off my head. I will bare my neck to the greater man. I repeat to you, this is nothing that an American patriot would do. They would never swear allegiance. Allegiance
To another man, but they're swearing allegiance to the flag, to the United States
The
of America.
Constitution itself says there shall be no titles. The term allegiance is abhorrent to American patriotism. It is abhorrent. I don't care how many wars you fought in. Sadly, it is abhorrent.
Well, then you're saying that the idea of a citizen is abhorrent as well, then, right? Because citizens owe a duty of allegiance in return for an obligation of protection.
And how many children who are saying the Pledge of Allegiance know what the word allegiance even means?
Well,
I know
none
it
of
took
them.
me years
This is
before
the
I
other
even
thing
knew.
is that why in the world would you indoctrinate children with this prayer to
In
a
the
graven
same
image?
reason every religion indoctrinates their children with prayers and chants. Because that's all this really is. It's just a prayer to this idol. It's a chant. It's a creepy cult thing.
Well, Psychology Today is making that case. Would you like to hear a
I would
little bit
love
about what
this.
they've said? Well, David Nose.
I enjoy their articles there. They've got good stuff.
They do. And psychologytoday.com, David Nose writes, headline, have you talked with your kids about pledging allegiance?
Right, not about sex, but about the pledge.
Mm-hmm. Serious issues arise when we expect daily pledges of nationalism from children.
This could be as important of a conversation to have with your kids as the talk about sex.
Yeah, and more relevant for more of their life.
True.
Are you a bad American if you refuse to recite the Pledge of Allegiance? Are you a bad parent if you encourage your child to opt out of the pledge in school? Not at all. In fact, the right to refuse participation in the pledge has been guaranteed by the United States Supreme Court. I didn't know that. It would be a mistake to assume that the Pledge of Allegiance is an exercise that somehow unites all good citizens. At a minimum, parents should talk with their kids about the pledge, about what it means and what it doesn't mean, and even its history. Thanks, Mark. For starters, kids should understand that the exercise is voluntary, because many schools don't inform them of this.
Yeah, imagine how it feels if you don't want to do it for whatever reason, and it feels like you have to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's not what America's about.
Yeah, it's very clearly not voluntary for a lot of people in school. They will be coerced. They will be threatened by the teachers and the administrators, and in some cases, other classmates into joining in with the group and saying the pledge. More coming up here. You can share your experiences with the pledge. It's Free Talk Live. All right, so we're talking about the pledge. The Pledge of Allegiance, which many of us were basically forced to do in school, forced through either overt threats or just kind of the coercion of the group, if you will, the way group dynamics work. And it's indoctrination, straight up. That's all it is. It was written by a socialist back in the late 1800s. You can go and look him up. His name's Francis Bellamy. There's a Bellamy Salute. I posted a link to the Wikipedia article about the Bellamy Salute on our Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. That Wikipedia article does have photos of American school children doing a fascist salute to the flag, which looks a lot like the Nazi salute. In fact, the Nazis apparently borrowed it from the United States, from what I understand. And so there's this kind of nasty history behind the Pledge of Allegiance. The average person, I don't think, knows. They didn't teach me this in government school. That's for darn sure. And Derek J., you're sharing with us a Psychology Today piece, which we're going to continue here in a moment. But first, let's go to Bobby, listening in Kentucky, I believe. Bobby, you're on Free Talk Live. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, what's on your mind tonight?
I was going to say, do y'all really think that there's not having no alliance to the country that you live in that allows you to, have radio shows such as you do? I mean, I'm not saying you should, like he said earlier, bow our heads and stick our neck out for, the king or the Lord or however he interpreted the allegiance. But, like you said, patriotism has to step in somewhere with this pledge.
Well, hold on a second. Let's slow down for just a moment. Look, I am grateful to live in a place where my lieges will allow me to yammer on into a microphone and take phone calls from people without, for the most part, interfering. However, those very same lieges will demand that you pay your fees to them in order to have the ability to broadcast. We don't do it directly. They don't license individuals anymore to broadcast, but they do license radio stations, and the average person cannot afford such a license. They cannot afford to start up their own radio station through the legal system. So it is not free speech here, and the FCC is certainly nothing to be proud of in any way, shape, or form. Now, your other part of your question was about having some form of sense of patriotism. Is that right? Did we lose you, Bobby? I think we might have lost Bobby.
Yeah, I think that...
Comments on patriotism, gentlemen.
Well, I think that I'm as grateful as anybody to live in something like the 20 to 30th freest country on the planet. I mean, the United States there's been lists, economic freedom, social freedom, freedom of the press, and sadly the United States, which was the birthplace of these ideas, well, I don't know the birthplace. Yeah, the first place that it was sort of tried, I guess. Not doing really very well on these lists anymore. I think the freedom we have left in this country is the freedom to complain. And you can believe I'm going to do that. As every other freedom gets taken away, I'm going to complain about it. I think that this country is going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. And I think that patriotism rewards bad behavior on the part of government officials. Patriotism is allegiance to the government, not to a country, because the politicians run the country. If I have allegiance to Walmart, I essentially have allegiance to the way it is run. And that's what it comes down to. The government is a group of people that are supposedly providing you with a service. Now, it's a mandatory service, and they'll kill you or throw you in jail if you don't want their services, or if you refuse to pay for their services, I should say.
Yeah.
But that's what they are. You shouldn't really have allegiance. I mean, I'll talk to you about this idea of patriotism. I think it's kind of ludicrous. I think it's an outmoded idea. I think that it had value at one point to get people behind each other, to sort of create this oneness. But I don't.
Doesn't it create ethnocentrism, basically? The idea
to some extent
that we're the best. This land's got the best people and the best ideas and the best everything. And got to be honest, it's not the best in every way. It's not. And in the United States, as you're pointing out, Mark, the U.S. dropping on the rankings of economic freedom, dropping on the rankings of journalistic freedom as well. The Reporters Without Borders report. What are we, number 40 or 30 something?
Yeah,
there? It's terrible.
I hope it's not a biased report. I tend to feel like it, but maybe I'll go crazy. The United States is the 15th freest place on the planet.
It may be the wrong definition, but I think patriotism to a lot of people just means more or less like allegiance to your fellow man who you live around, your neighbors. It's not so much about countries as it is like your neighborhood. And I want to make clear that it's really concerning that the caller seemed to equate reciting the pledge with being a patriot. I mean, like, if patriotism is about serving your fellow man and looking out for your neighbors, how is reciting a pledge doing that?
I've never heard patriotism defined that way.
Well, it means
almost always has something to do with
fatherland
country.
In Latin, with the patria, father. So it seems like, where your people come from.
Patriotism, according to the Wikipedia, is generally speaking cultural attachment to one's homeland or devotion to one's country. Normally.
I guess so. So it is country. It has to be country related.
I think that there's something wrapped up in there with the sense of the community, that they believe that their community is better because they're in this country that has these things that we should be appreciative of. And I think it's important to appreciate the good things that we do have. And it can certainly be a valid critique of this show or many shows on talk radio that you don't appreciate enough what you do have, and that you're always talking about the bad things going on out there. There's a lot of bad stuff happening, and you guys focus on the negatives too often. Maybe we should just and I think that there's also this message that's not really explicitly stated, is that, hey, why don't you guys just shut the F up? Things are just fine here.
Yeah, sure. Our freedoms are diminishing every day. Well, not every day, but freedoms are diminishing over time. You can see the country's going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. The politicians are spending us into insolvency. They're essentially enslaving our grandchildren or great-grandchildren with their debt. But you should love them for it, because flags, eagles, and F-18 flyovers.
We're the best.
Well, the future...
And the rockets' red glare.
Oh, gosh, no.
I mean...
The future is with the children, and if children are reciting these pledges, that's a concern for people who think that like serious participation in the exercise would require a child to make affirmations that they don't believe in, that the child doesn't even know, or maybe they go against their own core beliefs or their family's beliefs.
Well, right, as you pointed out, they're affirming ideas that they don't even really have a grasp on yet, and that's
problematic.
Just rote indoctrination. That's rote memorization and regurgitation of propaganda.
It's unhealthy.
That's all it is. And, maybe you could make it more obvious by replacing the object. Like, what if you took the flag out of the holder and you put something else in its place? Right, anything at all. I pledge allegiance to Budweiser and the United States of America, and it it's just so absurd. It's obviously, to us now, because we're on the outside of this paradigm, it's obviously this icon, this thing that people are revering. And it's really just a flag. It's just a piece of cloth. Derek J., let's continue with Psychology Today's piece on Have You Talked to Your Kids About the Pledge?
Yeah, well, there's all different kinds of families, and some believe in God and others don't, so the under God clause is problematic for them. There are others who don't believe that the country provides liberty and justice for all. I know that's part of the pledge that tipped me off to say, like, I'm not down for this. I don't think that there is liberty and justice for all in the U.S. That was
not even close.
As a stubborn, goth becoming teenager in high school, I was saying I don't want to be down with this pledge. I don't think that they do what they say, provide liberty and justice for all. And then
also, what's more important, by the way, if you're pledging allegiance to the flag and the United States, and that somehow you're also pledging to the idea of liberty and justice for all, if the United States becomes...
You're pledging to the republic. We should be clear about our language. You're pledging to the republic for which the flag stands. It's, so it's not the liberty and justice for all, right? It's the republic.
And the flag.
No,
I pledge allegiance
to
to the
the
flag.
flag and the republic.
The idea is that the republic embodies those things, though,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah, I
if
guess
it's
so.
if it's clear that it's not embodying those things, at which point do you remove your allegiance?
Yeah, you're like, hey, you're not standing for liberty and justice anymore.
The
I don't have
Bellamy's
allegiance.
wanted to include more things in the pledge. If you'll read
Right.
in this article, they want to include other
Oh,
things in
really?
the pledge, some extra fluffy words that. That their friends and people they talk to sort of said, no, we don't really want to do that because it sounds too much like you want the black people and the women treated the same as the rest of us. And so, I mean, there is a history of exclusion already in the pledge
Wow.
itself.
All right, let's dig in further.
Okay, so for any humanist family, there's numerous issues relating to the pledge that are worth discussing. So a few of them. The loyalty oath problem. No matter how much you love your country, you could question the wisdom of any recitation that essentially amounts to a loyalty oath. Mark sort of got into this earlier. To be good citizens, we must visibly and publicly pledge our allegiance? And even children must do so on a daily basis. It's interesting that the Founding Fathers never felt it desirable to promote such loyalty recitations from their citizens.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the
Right,
pledge
this came along 100+ years later.
Yep, wasn't even written until 1892, a full century after the founding era. The framers, as men of reason with Enlightenment values, most likely would have been aghast at the idea of citizens being expected to regularly recite a loyalty pledge. Sounds true. Because, they fought a battle against the British about all this. I assume that's the stories I hear.
The United States, the United States, I should say the colonies over here in North America, there's a huge list of rebellions that went on prior to the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
And a lot of them had to do with these loyalty oaths. These loyalty oaths are a trick.
How
I'm not
so?
kidding you. This was the Pledge of Allegiance is a trick.
For what?
Just like the rest of these loyalty oaths. Because you believe your word means something, don't you?
Yes.
Ian, you believe your word means something. When you say something, you believe it,
I'm
right?
only as good as my word.
I believe it too. That's what middle-class people like us think. That's what the lower-class people like, people lower than the ruling class think. That's what the ruling class counts on. They want you to recite loyalty oaths because they believe your word is worth something. They believe that you believe that your word is worth something. They, on the other hand, they will practice diplomacy and politics and these other terms that mean lying, right? They won't even use the term lying because they know that no one will believe that they use the term lying, so they use terms like politics.
Yeah.
They're politicians, which is a term that is synonymous with liar, but somehow Americans and people around the world will allow themselves to be ruled by politicians. They would never allow themselves to be ruled by liars, thieves, killers, sycophants. They would never let that happen.
Let's go to John. He's in northern Minnesota listening to WNMT. Hello, John.
Yeah. What flag are you talking about? There's two different flags. There's one with the red, white, and blue, which are the three colors, and then there's one with the four colors with the gold on it and the two-headed bird at the end of a stick.
I love that one because it's like adds a little extra something to the flag.
I
just
don't
a
want to
little
pledge
fringy
to
things.
either flag. I'm not interested in
Well,
pledging to
yeah.
anyone's government.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But what is the gold and the two-headed bird stand
Why don't you
for?
tell me?
I think doesn't it look like the epaulets on like a captain's uniform?
Go
Yeah,
ahead. Give us what it means.
I've heard or read some places where it said it's the martial law, and it does not represent the United States.
Yeah, there's a conspiracy theory out there about the gold-fringed flag, that if you go into a courtroom and they've got a gold-fringed flag, that it means you're actually under admiralty law and you're not under the common law anymore, and you need to get out of that courtroom. And
It's
you
only
need to
the
get
one side of the bar, though.
Well, that's why they call them magistrates now.
But they had magistrates in ancient Rome.
Yeah,
And we had one of those flags in church. I remember we said the
see.
pledge
Yeah.
in church too. And
Was it a
had
gold
yeah, it had gold
gold-fringed?
fringes and the eagles at the top.
They're in on it.
Yeah,
they
they're
had
all
it
in on
one
it.
place and the people wanted to take it out. Some of them wanted to take it out.
John, thanks for the
They
call
wanted to
tonight. I
take it out.
appreciate hearing from you.
Okay.
I really don't concern myself with conspiracy theories like that. To me,
Okay.
it doesn't matter whether there's a gold fringe on the flag in the courtroom or not. The man in the
Put
the
a
man in the
yellow,
robe
I'll
is
put a
going to
green one.
he's going to ruin people's
Green or
lives
orange.
regardless. And I thank you for the time and the call tonight. Was he saying I was brainwashed? I couldn't make out what he was saying.
I didn't hear him.
Toll-free
Sorry.
number 855-450-FREE. Let's continue, though.
Another problem with the pledge is that it promotes nationalism. Wow. We can love our country while still being skeptical of nationalism, the article at Psychology Today writes. We can agree that America is a marvelous place from sea to shining sea, and that the principles upon which it was founded are worthy of exaltation. But that doesn't mean we should constantly encourage widespread feelings of nationalism. History shows that national pride in America and elsewhere can be overdone, and it can lead to militarism.
Yeah, it can lead to killing.
And a diminished appreciation of outsiders. That's putting it lightly.
And I'd say that this is the greatest thing about the country that we live in the United States, is that we don't have to be concerned with foreign wars. The likelihood of the Great Red Horde from Canada, sliding across the 47th parallel in order to take over the United States, really slim, right? Like, the only thing the Mexicans seem to want are jobs. Yeah. That's a good thing. These are good things. Yes. Most wars around historically and around the world have happened with, geographic countries, geopolitical organizations that are directly next to each other. We don't have to worry about that in the United States. The United States, sadly, its government, I should say, sadly has decided that it needs to run all over the world looking for wars because there just aren't enough at home.
Well, I like what they say, because I always believed this stuff about nationalism, but they're taking it from a psychology perspective, which I can really appreciate. Mm-hmm. Saying nationalism can be seen as a manifestation of the human tendency toward tribalism, and such "we are so great" thinking is hardly an impulse that should be encouraged.
I totally agree.
So glad to hear a psychology magazine talk about this. Beyond our borders are fellow human beings whose worth and dignity should not be disregarded. As such, maybe we shouldn't instill in our children a daily dose of national superiority.
Totally agree. This is great stuff.
Isn't this awesome?
And I know we're not even close to being done yet, right?
Well, they've just really got two more major bullet points. The third is the racist and sexist roots, which, again, Mark touched on. Liberty and justice are fine values, but they're hardly a comprehensive statement of important American values. When Francis Bellamy, a socialist, originally wrote the pledge, he considered including the values of equality and fraternity in the recitation. But as Mark pointed out, he was discouraged from doing so. Too many Americans, particularly in leadership, were opposed to equality for women and African Americans. So do we really want to continue saying the pledge when it had these kinds of roots?
What was number 4?
Number 4, the under God problem. We all know that was added in 1954.
That's the most common objection to the pledge, but it's sad when you see atheists, they understand that part of the pledge is bad, but they're totally fine with pledging their allegiance to the state and worshiping the state. And hopefully some atheists will, and humanists or whatever, will open their eyes to that one.
Hope so.
Your religion is the state. If you want to be free of religion, you'll need to free yourself from that one, too.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.